A security camera offers a promise. If anything goes wrong, the lens will tell the truth. But sometimes the camera records a question instead of an answer, a moment that refuses to be explained. This is the story of Elisa Lam, a young woman whose last recorded movements became one of the most viral, baffling, and debated pieces of footage in recent memory. Found later in the sealed rooftop water tank of the infamous Cecil Hotel, Elisa's death touched on mental health, hotel neglect, and the hungry machinery of internet conspiracy. Tonight we trace every fact, every rumor, and every official finding, and ask a simple, urgent question. What really happened to Elisa Lam? She arrived in Los Angeles eager to explore. A 21-year-old student from Vancouver, Elisa Lam was traveling alone in January 2013, carrying a notebook, a curiosity about cities, and the kind of online life that made her both visible and private. She checked into the Cecil Hotel, a rundown downtown building with a long history of crime, suicide, and a reputation made it an unsettling place for tourists. A fact that would later feed the public imagination. Elisa's last confirmed movements inside the hotel, captured by an elevator camera on January 31st, would spur more questions than answers. On February 19, 2013, hotel staff investigating complaints about the building's water. Guests had reported low pressure and foul-smelling, discolored water, discovered Elisa's body floating in one of the rooftop water tanks. The tanks were large, industrial cisterns used to supply water to the hotel and its businesses. Her body was found nude, and clothes matching what she'd been wearing in the elevator footage were floating nearby. Her watch and room key were also recovered in the tank. The discovery itself sparked immediate shock and a media frenzy. It was the elevator footage that turned a tragic death into an international sensation. The clip, a grainy 2.5-minute loop from a closed-circuit camera, shows Elisa entering the elevator, behaving in ways viewers described as erratic, pressing multiple buttons, peeking out as if to see if someone is there, stepping in and out, waving her hands at the hallucinatory gestures that would set the internet alight. At several points, she steps outside the elevator with the doors open, returns, presses more buttons, and then walks off camera. The randomness, the pauses, the awkward gestures, together they formed an image people could not leave alone. The autopsy and coroner's report added layers to the mystery while offering official conclusions. The Los Angeles County coroner found no signs of physical trauma or sexual assault on Elisa's body. Toxicology detected only small amounts of over-the-counter medications and a very low level of alcohol. No recreational drugs were found. However, the coroner reported that Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and that her medication levels suggested she had not been taking her prescribed drugs consistently. The coroner ultimately ruled her death an accidental drowning with bipolar disorder, listed as a significant contributing factor. The manner of how she entered the water tank remained unexplained. From there, the story split into two parallel narratives. On one track were the official findings. No signs of forced entry at the hotel, no trauma on the body, and no conclusive evidence of foul play. On the other track was the internet. Forums, YouTube theorists, and social media amplified the elevator footage, dissected wardrobe details, and speculated about the Cecil Hotel's shadowy history. a ready-made haunted backdrop for every conspiracy. The gap between the coroner's sober language and the internet's fevered speculation widened the mystery, and the case became a mirror reflecting our anxieties about mental illness, the reliability of institutions, and the appetite for sensational stories. To understand Elisa's final hours, we must walk the timeline closely. She was last seen on January 31st in the early evening, caught on camera in the elevator. Hotel staff later reported seeing her at odd moments, in the lobby, on the roof doors, but their recollections were inconsistent. Guests had complained about the property's water pressure days before, but maintenance protocols were lax. The water tanks were often accessed through a roof hatch and a narrow ladder, and their maintenance schedule and security appeared to be insufficient for a building open to the public. The roof hatch itself lacked rigorous locking safeguards, and the cisterns were large, heavy, and difficult to access in emergency situations. These operational failures would become a focal point in civil suits brought by Elisa's family and by guests who had complained about the water. The elevator video layered ambiguity on top of ambiguity. In it, Elisa appears to exhibit disinhibited behavior. She presses buttons repeatedly and makes odd arm motions. She appears to hide from an unseen figure, then act as if she's playing some private game. Some observers argued she was demonstrating symptoms of a psychotic episode or severe manic behavior consistent with bipolar disorder, possibly exacerbated by missed medication. Others proposed she was being stalked or followed, making her attempts to hide and peer into corridors understandable. A third group, less restrained, proposed visions of supernatural interference tied to the Cecil's sordid history. The footage served as Rorschach inkblot. What viewers saw often revealed more about their fears than about Elisa's reality. Investigators treated the scene as a death investigation, but faced major obstacles. Forensics showed no defensive wounds, no signs of struggle, and no DNA or fingerprints inside the tank that indicated a violent attack. The clothing in the tank matched the elevator footage, but the cause of entry into the tank was critical. How could a 21-year-old woman climb a ladder to a rooftop, lift a heavy hatch, get into a 1,000-gallon tank with a narrow opening, and drown without leaving external marks or evidence of foul play? Experts debated the mechanics. Could she slip and fall? Could she have been disoriented and accidentally fallen into the water? Could someone have lifted her? None of these scenarios could be confirmed beyond doubt. Public attention soon turned to the hotel itself. The Cecil, later renamed the Stay on Main and the Stay on Maple at various points, had a reputation that attracted myths. It had housed serial killers, hosted suicides, and been home to transient populations. Its condition in 2013 was poor. Poor security, questionable management, and a location near Skid Row, an area with high homelessness and crime rates. The hotel's history made it a perfect urban legend factory. For some, that contextual darkness made Elisa's death more likely to be sinister. For others, it merely underscored how a building's neglect can create tragic vulnerabilities. The hotel's owners faced lawsuits from guests and from Elisa's family, and the legal wrangling became another chapter in the story. Years later, the case is still a study in how narrative fills the vacuum left by evidence. The internet did not merely comment on the official story. It amplified alternate narratives, from plausible hypotheses to outlandish conspiracies. Some of these theories found oxygen because certain details remained peculiar. Surveillance footage with unexplained time gaps, the hotel's lax access to the rooftop, and the hotel worker who discovered Elisa's body reporting that the water had a disturbing taste. But three inconvenient facts stubbornly undermined the most lurid theories. The autopsy did not show physical trauma consistent with homicide. Toxicology did not reveal incapacitating drugs or alcohol. And no credible witness placed a third party in the water tank or reported a violent encounter. The evidence pointed toward tragedy, but stopped short of providing a neat explanation. Mental health, and specifically bipolar disorder, was a central theme in official analysis. Elisa had a documented history of bipolar disorder and had written online about her struggles. Her family and friends described mood fluctuations and episodes of disorientation. The coroner's report stressed that her psychiatric condition was a significant contributing factor, and that her prescription medication levels suggested recent non-compliance. Clinicians noted that when people with bipolar disorder stop taking medication, they may become impulsive, disoriented, or experience psychotic symptoms. This medical explanation does not satisfy everyone, particularly those who insist on external causes, but it fits much of the measurable data and gives a plausible pathway from hotel wandering to accidental drowning. Still, the question persisted. Why did Elisa go to the roof? The hotel's layout made it possible to access the roof via a door that was not always secured, and maintenance workers sometimes traversed the area casually. Elisa might have climbed the roof seeking privacy, been in a confused state, and accidentally fallen into the tank. Or she might have been attempting to retrieve something, or to escape perceived danger. Investigators tried to reconstruct the timeline by interviewing staff and guests. But human memory is fragile, and, in a hotel as chaotic as the Cecil, recollections were often contradictory. That uncertainty fed the public's hunger for a more dramatic explanation. Civil litigation added another layer of documentation and discovery. Guests sued for contaminated water and the hotel's negligent management. Elisa's family pursued legal avenues seeking accountability for the conditions that allowed their daughter's death. During pre-trial discovery in civil cases, some information about the hotel's inspection routines and rooftop access policies became public, revealing a pattern of lax maintenance and management negligence. Those revelations did not prove homicide, but they did help explain how the environment could enable a tragic accident, especially for someone in an unstable mental state. Lawsuits settled or were dismissed in years that followed, but they underscored a systemic failure rather than an isolated malicious act. The media's role in shaping perception cannot be overstated. The elevator footage spread across YouTube and social platforms, looping endlessly as commentators offered their take. Forensic analysts suggested technical reasons for the elevator's behavior. Mental health professionals explained potential clinical causes for Elisa's gestures. Skeptics accused mainstream media of sensationalism, and paranormal channels retrofitted horror into the narrative by referencing movies and ghost lore. The viral circulation of the footage made the case less about a private tragedy and more about public meaning-making. That had consequences. It pulled attention away from forensic subtleties and toward spectacle. The public, primed by decades of true crime melodrama, fractured into camps that either accepted the coroner's ruling or refused to believe the official explanation without dramatic proof. Professional analysts offered counterpoints to some of the most persistent internet theories. Elevator mechanics explained how older elevator systems could become unresponsive if many buttons were pressed, potentially causing doors to stay open or behave oddly. Forensic specialists noted that the lack of physical trauma and absence of toxic intoxicants diminished the likelihood of third-party violence, though nothing could entirely exclude it. Psychiatrists emphasized that a person in a psychotic or manic state could display the very strange behaviors observed in the footage and then make dangerous choices, like climbing into a water tank. The convergence of mechanical, medical, and managerial failures provides a sober frame for understanding how such a tragedy could unfold with no clear human villain. Several procedural oddities still invited suspicion. Why had maintenance staff not checked the water tank sooner when guests complained about pressure and smell? Why were the tanks accessible via a roof hatch that could be opened without alarm? Why did it take weeks before someone reported Elisa missing and before her body was discovered? These are valid criticisms of operational negligence. But negligence? The failure to secure dangerous spaces, the failure to follow routine checks, is not the same as intentional harm. The pattern of neglect creates risk, and risk can meet misfortune in ways that feel indistinguishable from malevolence. Time has not softened the public appetite for Elisa's story. Her death has inspired documentaries, podcasts, and fictional retellings that both explore and exploit the mystery. These cultural artifacts keep the case in circulation, asking new audiences to decide what they think happened. Some productions emphasize systemic failure and the sad arc of a vulnerable young woman. Others foreground the enigmatic elevator footage and encourage viewers to develop theories. The case lives on in media because it resists a tidy conclusion. Our curiosity is sustained by the chatty discomfort of unanswered questions. For Elisa's family, the relentless public interest has been a mixed blessing. Attention kept pressure on officials to investigate, to disclose autopsy results, and to defend against conspiracy. But sensational coverage also amplified speculation and sometimes circulated misinformation. The family has repeatedly asked for respectful treatment of Elisa's memory and for sensitivity regarding her diagnosed mental illness. Their plea is a reminder that behind every viral clip and every online thread is a human life, with friends, parents, and loved ones who endured the consequences of public spectacle. There are still steps the public can take that are helpful rather than sensational. Support for mental health resources, for secure housing operations, and for humane treatment of vulnerable populations are meaningful responses. Advocating for better building codes, for thorough inspections of facilities that serve transient populations, and for transparent maintenance protocols can prevent future tragedies that emerge from neglect. Public curiosity is natural, but channeling it towards systemic reform honors victims in a constructive way. History may never provide each answer Elisa's family sought. The coroner's ruling, while authoritative, cannot satisfy everyone. For some, the image of Elisa's body in a water tank is an unbearable enigma that refuses the comforts of clinical explanation. For others, the simplest, darkest interpretation An accidental drowning while unmedicated and in a disoriented state is plausible and consistent with the measurable facts. Both reactions are human responses to loss, and both reveal how much we prefer story to ambiguity. As we close this chapter, there is one clear truth. Elisa Lam's death did not happen in isolation. It occurred in a social and institutional context: a decaying hotel, a lack of adequate safeguards, a health system that left some sufferers vulnerable, all against the backdrop of a nation that consumes mystery for entertainment. Elisa's life and death press us to ask how to better care for people in crisis, how to enforce basic safety standards in public accommodations, and how to hold media discourse accountable when it risks amplifying pain without advancing truth. If you are moved by Elisa's story, consider transforming curiosity into action. Support mental health initiatives in your community. Advocate for stronger oversight of rental and hotel properties, and be mindful when sharing sensational content online. When wonder becomes rumor, it can hurt the living. When curiosity becomes advocacy, it can save lives. Let Elisa's name stay known not merely as a viral clip, but as a call to compassion and to systemic change. The camera caught Elisa Lam in motion, animated, strange, human, and later held a terrible silence where she once was. We can still look at that footage and ask our questions, but we can also listen to the admonition it contains. Look after one another, secure the failing places, and act when systems fall short. In the face of grief and bewilderment, do not surrender to sensationalism. Search instead for dignity, accountability, and the slow work of prevention. Elisa's story is a cold case that will always invite conjecture. Let it also invite reform.